She ran across my yard screaming, "Stop right there. That house belongs to my son." I was standing on my own porch, holding a box of old nails and dust-covered tools, staring at a cabin that had been empty for almost 30 years. The wood was dark and cracked, windows broken, roof half gone. But it was mine. I had closed on it 3 weeks ago. Paid in full. Cash. And this woman, perfect hair, red blazer, phone in hand, was yelling like I had stolen something from her. "I just bought this property," I said calmly. "You're standing on my land." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Sweetheart, you clearly don't understand how this neighborhood works." That word, sweetheart. Behind her, 2 men in polo shirts with clipboards walked up like backup dancers. One of them stuck a paper on my front door. HOA violation notice. I hadn't even moved in yet. "You can't restore this cabin," she said. "This is a protected property. My family has claim over it." I looked at the paper. It didn't even have a real stamp. The logo looked printed from someone's home printer. "Ma'am," I said, "this cabin was listed by the county after unpaid taxes. I have the deed." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You think paper means something here?" There was something off about the way she said that. Like she wasn't bluffing. Like she had done this before. "I suggest," she continued, "you walk away before this becomes ugly." I smiled slightly. "I've seen ugly. This doesn't scare me." That made her eyes narrow. The cabin sat on 5 acres of land, near the edge of a quiet town in Colorado. Built in 1876, the listing said structural damage. No utilities, as is condition. Most people saw a dead building. I saw history, and I needed that history. After my wife passed last year, silence followed me everywhere. The city apartment felt like a hospital room. My 8-year-old son, Eli, stopped talking much. He used to laugh loud. Now he just watched. I bought the cabin because it was far from noise, because fixing something broken felt easier than fixing myself. But apparently, peace was not allowed here. "You have 48 hours, the woman snapped. "Remove all construction plans. No changes without HOA approval." "This house isn't in an HOA zone," I reply. One of the polo shirt men cleared his throat. "Mom, maybe we should." She cut him off. "Don't correct me. That told me everything." I pulled out my phone and opened the county property map, zoomed in, showed the boundary lines clearly outside the HOA subdivision. She didn't even look. Instead, she pointed toward the road. "You see those homes? I manage this entire area. We maintain standards. By threatening legal owners?" She stepped even closer. "By protecting what belongs to my son." There it was again. "Your son doesn't own this," I said. She leaned in and whispered, "It was promised to him." Promised? By who? The county records showed no private transfer, no trust, no family claim. Just decades of unpaid taxes from an elderly man who died without heirs. Unless, who promised it? I asked. She straightened up. "You don't need to know that." The wind pushed through the broken cabin windows, making a hollow sound like a warning. Eli stepped out from behind the truck, holding a small wooden sign he had painted. "Dad, can I hang this?" The sign said, "Future home." The woman looked at him, then back at me. "You brought a child into this mess." "This isn't a mess," I said softly. "It's our home." Her face changed. Not softer, harder. "You have no idea what you stepped into." She turned to the men. "Call it in." One of them hesitated. "Call who?" She glared. "Security." 10 minutes later, a black SUV rolled up. Not marked police. Just tinted windows and flashing amber lights. 2 men stepped out wearing badges clipped to their belts. They looked official, but something felt wrong. No patrol car, no county logo. The taller one approached me. "Sir, we've received reports of illegal occupation." I stared at him. "Illegal occupation of property I own?" The woman crossed her arms. "He's trespassing on private land." I handed the man my deed copy. He barely glanced at it. "Sir, until ownership is verified, we're asking you to leave." "Verified by who?" He didn't answer. Eli grabbed my hand tighter. I crouched down to his level. "It's okay," I whispered. "Just stay behind me." The woman smiled like she had already won. That's when I noticed something. The badge on the tall man's belt. The seal was slightly crooked, the edges peeling. Fake. I stood up slowly. "You're not county officers." His jaw tightened. "Excuse me? I've worked with real deputies before," I said calmly. "Their badges don't come from costume shops." Silence. The woman's smile faded for half a second, then came back. "Remove him," she said coldly. The taller man stepped closer. "Sir." Last warning. I looked at my cabin. Broken, abandoned, waiting. Then I looked back at him. "You really want to do this?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, because what they didn't know, what Karen didn't know, what none of them bothered to check, was that I didn't just randomly buy land here. I chose this county for a reason, and I had already made a phone call the day I signed those papers. A call to someone who owed me a favor. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Not from the black SUV, from the highway. The woman's confident posture shifted. "What did you do?" she asked sharply. I didn't smile. I didn't raise my voice. I just said one sentence. "You should have checked who you were trying to remove from his own land." The sirens grew louder. Not fading. Not passing by. Coming straight toward us. The tall fake officer stepped back first. Just half a step. But I saw it. Karen didn't. She folded her arms tighter. "This is unnecessary drama," she snapped. "I have influence in this county." I looked at her calmly. "You might want to save that sentence." The black SUV engine suddenly started again. One of the fake officers whispered, "We should go." She turned on him. "Don't you dare." That's when two real county patrol cars turned onto the dirt road. Lights flashing red and blue. Dust rising behind them. Eli squeezed my hand harder. "Dad, are we in trouble?" "No," I said softly. "We're about to watch something interesting." The patrol car stopped. Real deputies stepped out. Proper uniforms. Proper badges. Body cams on. One of them looked straight at me. And nodded. Karen noticed. Her voice changed instantly. "Oh, thank God. Officers. This man is trespassing and threatening our neighborhood." The deputy ignored her and walked straight toward me. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter." I could feel Karen freeze beside me. "You know him?" she asked sharply. The deputy looked at her now. "Yes, ma'am, we do." The fake officers were already inching toward their SUV. "Stay where you are," another deputy ordered. The tall fake officer tried to speak. "We were responding to a call. Impersonating law enforcement is a felony." The deputy cut him off. Silence hit like a brick. Karen's face went pale. "Impersonating? That's ridiculous. They're private security." "Private security doesn't carry fake county badges," the deputy replied calmly. One of the deputies removed the crook badge from the tall man's belt. "You want to explain this?" The man didn't answer. Karen stepped forward. "This is being blown out of proportion. I manage this community. That cabin belongs to my son." The deputy looked confused. "Your son?" "Yes. It was promised to him." "By who?" She hesitated. That hesitation said everything. I reached into my truck and pulled out a folder. Thick, organized, copies of the deed, county auction records, tax liens, certified stamps. "I closed legally," I said, 3 weeks ago. "Clean title." The deputy flipped through the papers. "Everything checks out." Karen's voice cracked slightly. "That's impossible, ma'am," the deputy said carefully. "This property has been abandoned for nearly 30 years. It went through legal tax foreclosure. There is no record in there." She shook her head. No, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand," I said quietly. "You were waiting for it to sit long enough so no one would question it." Her eyes snapped to me. There it was. Twist number 1. She wasn't protecting inheritance. She was protecting a plan. The deputy turned back to the fake officers. One of them tried to run. "Dad, move." Within seconds, he was face down in the dirt. Eli's eyes were wide. I gently turned him so he wouldn't see too much. Karen's voice became desperate. "This is harassment. I'll call the mayor." The deputy sighed. "You already called someone pretending to be us." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I stepped closer to her, but kept my voice even. "You've been scaring buyers away for years, haven't you?" She didn't respond. I continued. "Every time someone showed interest, you hit them with fake HOA threats, fake violations, fake security, until they walked." The polo shirt man with the clipboard slowly backed away like he didn't know her. "You told people it wasn't for sale," I added. "So eventually, you or your son could claim it." Cheat. Her lips trembled. "You have no proof." I looked toward the patrol car. "I installed cameras the first day I stepped on this land." The deputy held up a tablet. "We reviewed the footage from today's incident." Karen's confidence cracked completely. "You recorded me," she whispered. "On my land?" I said, "Yes." The deputy turned to her. "Ma'am, you're being detained for filing a false report and conspiracy to impersonate law enforcement." Her voice went sharp again. "You can't arrest me. Do you know who my husband is?" There it was. The power card. The deputy didn't even blink. "Does he know what you've been doing?" She went silent. As they placed handcuffs on her wrists, she looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she said quietly. I met her stare. "It is for today." As they guided her toward the patrol car, she shouted one last thing. "That cabin was meant for my son. You stole his future." I watched the door close on her words. The fake officers were in cuffs too. The dust settled slowly. One deputy walked back toward me. "You handled that calmly." "I've dealt with worse," I said. He studied me for a moment. "Sheriff mentioned you might run into resistance." Karen's head snapped up from inside the patrol car when she heard that word. "Sheriff." She stared at me through the glass, confused, scared, realizing, because she had no idea that the favor I mentioned earlier wasn't just knowing someone in this county. It was that the sheriff and I had served together overseas. And when I told him I was buying land here, he said one thing: "If anyone tries to bully you off it, call me." I didn't even need to call him today. He had already flagged this property. Because here's the part Karen never knew. She wasn't the first person who tried to claim that cabin. 3 years ago, another beer backed out after mysterious legal threats. 2 years ago, same thing, pattern. And the sheriff had been quietly watching. Karen thought she controlled this area. She didn't realize she had already been on someone else's radar. Eli looked up at me. "Dad, are we really staying?" I looked at the old cabin again. Broken windows, cracked wood, history buried under dust. "Yes," I said firmly, "we're staying." The patrol cars drove off with Karen inside, but as they turned the corner, one thing stuck in my mind. When she shouted about her son, it didn't sound fake. It sounded desperate, like she believed it. And that meant one of two things. Either she was lying very well, or someone had lied to her. And if that was true, this story wasn't finished, because while Karen was being driven away in handcuffs, somewhere else, someone else had just realized their long-running plan had collapsed by sunset. The cabin felt different. Not peaceful. Not yet. But claimed. Eli was sitting on the truck bed, eating chips, watching me measure the front porch beams. The air smelled like old pine and dust. For the first time in months, I felt something close to steady. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice, calm, controlled. "You should not have embarrassed my wife." I didn't ask who it was. "I didn't embarrass her," I said. "She broke the law." A short pause. Then, "You don't understand what you stepped into." I almost laughed. That sentence is getting old today. Click. He hung up. Eli looked at me. "Was that the yelling lady?" "No," I said. "That was someone worse." Night came fast in the mountains. I locked the truck and we drove back to the motel in town. I didn't want to sleep in the cabin yet, not until I fixed the doors. At 2:17 a.m., my phone rang again. This time it was the sheriff. "Your cabin just had a visitor," he said. I sat up straight. "Karen?" "No," he replied. "Her husband." That made sense. "Caught on camera?" I asked. "Yeah." He didn't know about the extra trail cam you installed behind the barn. I smiled slightly. "People always check the front." The sheriff's tone shifted. He wasn't just looking around. He was digging. Back side of the property, near the old oak tree. That oak tree, I had noticed disturbed so there earlier but assumed it was animal activity. "What did he find?" I asked. "Nothing," the sheriff said. "Because we stopped him." Silence filled the line. "Why would he dig on land he claims isn't yours?" I asked slowly. "That's what I'm wondering." The next morning, I drove back alone while Eli stayed with a friend the sheriff arranged. I parked near the back acreage and walked toward the oak tree. Fresh shovel marks. Someone had been searching for something specific. Not random. Targeted. I crouched down and brushed dirt aside with my hand. The sole felt loose about 2 feet in. And then my fingers hit something hard. Wood. Not tree root. A box. My heart started beating faster. I looked around. Quiet. No cars on the road. No neighbors watching. I kept digging until the edge of a small wooden chest appeared. Old, metal corners. Rusted latch. Someone had buried this decades ago. I didn't open it there. Instead, I loaded it carefully into the truck and drove straight to the sheriff's office. He locked the door behind us. Moment of truth, he said. We set the chest on his desk. The wood creaked as I lifted the lid. Inside, stacks of papers, old documents, property maps, and something else. A sealed envelope marked with a name, the same last name as Karen. My stomach tightened. She wasn't crazy. Her family name was connected to this land, but not the way she thought. The sheriff pulled on gloves and unfolded one of the larger documents. His eyebrows lifted. Well, he muttered, that explains everything. What? I asked. He turned the paper toward me. It was an original land agreement from 1876. The cabin wasn't just any cabin. It was part of a conditional land trust. The original owner had made a deal with the town founders. The land could never be transferred to any member of the Hawthorne family. Karen's maiden name, Hawthorne. The document was clear, signed, witnessed. Wide. I scanned the faded ink. Because the Hawthorne family had tried to seize the land illegally back then. They had attempted to force the owner out. History repeating itself. Karen thought this was her son's inheritance, but the truth was worse. Her family had been banned from owning it, legally, for 150 years. She didn't know. I said quietly, no. The sheriff replied, but her husband might. I opened the sealed envelope next. Inside was a letter written by the original cabin owner. It read, if any Hawthorne attempts to reclaim this land by force or deceit, the proof of their fraud is buried beneath the oak. Let the rightful owner decide what to do with it. Under the letter, photographs, old ones, of forged signatures, of stolen livestock, of land manipulation, evidence that had never gone public. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. If this gets out, it won't just be trespassing charges. It would destroy their family name in this town. Suddenly, the late-night digging made sense. Karen's husband wasn't searching for treasure. He was searching for this box. And he almost got it. I looked at the sheriff. If he knew about this, that means he's been planning something bigger. The sheriff finished. As if on cue, his office radio crackled. Sheriff, we have a situation at the Carter property. My chest tightened. What kind of situation? He asked. Fire. Everything inside me, and cold. We ran outside. Sirens again. But this time they weren't for Karen. They were for my cabin. The sky in the distance glowed orange. By the time we arrived, flames were climbing up the side wall I had just measured the day before. Eli's painted future home sign laid in the dirt, burning. I stood there frozen for half a second. Then I saw something through the smoke. A figure near the tree line, watching. Not running, watching. The sheriff saw it too. Get him, he shouted. Deputies chased toward the woods. The fire department worked fast, but half the porch collapsed before they could stop it. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity, because arson wasn't panic. It was desperation. Someone knew that box was no longer buried, and they were trying to erase the rest. As firefighters sprayed down the last flames, the sheriff walked back toward me. They caught him, he said. Karen's husband. He nodded slowly. And he wasn't alone. I looked at the cabin. Blackened wood. Smoke rising. Who else? I asked. The sheriff's face hardened. Your real estate agent. For a second, I thought I heard him wrong. My agent? I asked slowly. The sheriff didn't look away. He was in the woods. Gas can in the truck. Everything inside me, and still. That agent had shaken my hand, smiled, told me I was getting a rare historic opportunity. He knew I was a widower, knew I had a kid, knew this wasn't an investment flip, and he still stood in the trees, watching my home burn. They're both in custody, the sheriff continued. Your agent is talking. Already? I asked. He's scared, the sheriff said, more scared of prison than loyal. We drove back to the station. I didn't speak the whole way. In the interrogation room, my agent sat hunched over, face pale, hands cuffed. When he saw me through the glass, he dropped his eyes. The sheriff stepped inside first. You want to explain, he said calmly, why you were caught near a fire scene with accelerant in your truck. The agent swallowed hard. I didn't start it. Then who did? Silence. The sheriff placed a photo on the table. The oak tree, the disturbed dirt, the empty hole. The agent's face changed. You found it, he whispered. So you knew, I said from behind the glass. The sheriff pressed. Knew what? The agent looked broken now. The Hawthorns have been trying to get that land back for decades. How? The sheriff asked. scaring buyers, filing fake disputes, creating HOA pressure. Anything to keep it off the market long enough. And you? The sheriff asked. They paid me, he admitted. Every time someone showed interest, I'd quietly steer them away, tell them there were legal issues. My jaw tightened. So why sell it to me? I asked as I stepped into the room. He looked up slowly. Because Karen's husband said, you'd back out like the others. And when I didn't, he looked ashamed. He panicked. The sheriff leaned forward. Why was that box so important? The agent hesitated again, then said it. Because inside that box is proof the Hawthorne family committed fraud in the original land seizure attempt. If it becomes public, they lose more than reputation. What do they lose? I asked quietly. He looked at me. Their development contract. That hit harder than I expected. What development contract? The sheriff and I exchanged looks. The agent exhaled slowly. There's a resort project planned for the North Ridge. Luxury cabins. Big money. Investors already lined up. And my land, I asked, is the centerpiece. Everything clicked into place. The pressure. The fake authority. The desperation. They didn't want the old cabin for sentimental reasons. They needed it. Without that 5-acre section, the entire resort layout collapses. Access road fails code. View line breaks. Project dies. I leaned back slowly. So Karen screaming about inheritance was just the emotional cover, the agent said. She believed it, I asked. He nodded. Her husband told her the land was wrongfully taken from their family, that it was theirs by right. And she believed him. I said quietly. The sheriff crossed his arms. And he believed he could scare you off. I almost laughed. He really didn't check who I was. The agent frowned. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and opened an email. A formal letter from the State Historical Preservation Board. Approved 3 days ago. What is that? The sheriff asked. I slid the phone across the table while everyone was busy trying to push me out. I filed paperwork. The agent read it. His face drained of color. You didn't, Keith whispered. I did. The sheriff read over his shoulder, then looked at me. You had the cabin declared a protected historic landmark. I nodded. Based on age, original structure, and preserved documents found on site. The sheriff slowly smiled. That means. I finished the sentence. No commercial development can touch this land. Not now. Not ever. Silence filled the room. The agent slumped in his chair. You just killed a $50 million project, he said. I looked at him calmly. No. I replied. They killed it when they tried to burn my son's home. The sheriff stood up straight. That's arson, conspiracy, fraud, impersonation. This isn't going away. The agent's voice cracked. Karen doesn't even know about the resort. I looked at him. She doesn't know her husband planned to bulldoze the cabin after securing it. Another silence, bigger this time. Because that meant Karen wasn't just the villain, she was being used. Just like the old cabin had been used 150 years ago. The sheriff walked toward the door. We're bringing her back in. For what? I asked. For questioning. As we stepped into the hallway, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about land anymore. It wasn't even about money. It was about control. About powerful people assuming quiet families won't fight back. And they almost won. If I hadn't installed cameras, if I hadn't dug at the oak tree, if I hadn't filed landmark status quietly, if I had reacted with anger instead of patience. The sheriff's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked at me. You might want to sit down. I'm already standing, I said. He didn't smile. It's bigger than a resort. My stomach tightened again. What do you mean? He turned the screen toward me. An email leak. Investor list. Not just developers. State officials. One federal name. I read it twice, then looked up slowly. They weren't just trying to take my land, I said. The sheriff nodded. They were trying to bury something under it. For a moment, I didn't breathe. Bury what? I asked. The sheriff lowered his voice. Environmental reports. Old mining waste. I stared at him. The North Ridge used to have a silver mine, he continued. Closed in the 1920s, no proper cleanup records. And the resort, I asked, would have covered the whole area with cabins, parking lots, concrete, covering contamination, hiding it. My 5 acres, the cabin, the oak tree, were sitting right over the only untouched section. They needed this land to seal the map, I said quietly. The sheriff nodded. Without your parcel, The development fails inspection routes. With it, they could reroute everything. I let that sink in. This was never about inheritance, never about pride. It was about control. And silence. What's in those reports? I asked. Early soil samples show high arsenic levels near the ridge, he replied. If that gets out, the entire project collapses. Investors pull out, lawsuits start. And Karen's husband knew. I asked. He's on the investor email chain. Of course he was. I leaned back against the hallway wall. So burning the cabin was step one. The sheriff said. Destroy structure. Claim instability. Push emergency demolition. Clear land before historic status fully processes. My phone buzzed. Message from an unknown number. A photo. My motel. Taken from across the street. Below it, one sentence. Stop digging. I showed the sheriff. His jaw tightened. They're escalating. I didn't feel fear. I felt something colder, because threatening me was one thing. Photographing where my son sleeps, that crossed a line. I won't patrol near that motel, I said. Already on it, he replied. We walked back into the interrogation wing. Karen sat alone in a room now. No makeup touch-ups, no red blazer confidence, just a woman staring at a metal table. When she saw me through the glass, she looked confused, then angry, then confused again. I stepped inside. She spoke first. Did you enjoy humiliating me? I kept my voice steady. Did you know about the resort? Her expression shifted instantly. What resort? There it was. Truth. They told you this was your son's inheritance, I said carefully. It is, she snapped. My husband showed me documents. Did he show you investor emails? I asked. Silence. Did he show you environmental reports? I pressed. Her confidence cracked. What are you talking about? I leaned forward slightly. They were going to bulldoze the cabin. After you helped scare everyone away. She shook her head. No. They needed the land to complete a luxury development. The inheritance story. I paused. Was for you. Her breathing changed. That's not true, she whispered. The sheriff slid a printed email across the table. Her husband's name. Investor signatures. Project blueprint. Highlighted section. Carter parcel. Critical for access. Her hands trembled. He told me, she said slowly, that the land was stolen from our family generations ago. It was, I said, but your family were the ones who tried to steal it. Her head snapped up. I placed a copy of the 1876 document on the table. She read the first few lines. Her face drained of color. They banned us, she whispered. For fraud. The room went silent. For the first time, she didn't look powerful. She looked betrayed. My son, she said softly. He thinks we're fighting for his future. I didn't respond, because now the villain wasn't as simple. She looked up at me again. You found something under the tree, didn't you? I held her gaze. Yes. Her shoulders dropped. So that's why he panicked, she muttered. He tried to burn my home, I said calmly. Her eyes filled with something I didn't expect. Fear. Not for herself, for what she had helped start. I didn't know, she said. I believe you, I replied. And I did. But belief doesn't erase consequences. The sheriff stepped in. Your husband is facing arson and conspiracy charges. There's more coming. Karen closed her eyes. You don't understand, she said quietly. Then help me understand, I replied. She hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. There's someone above him. The air shifted. Above your husband? The sheriff asked. She nodded slowly. He answers to a man named Whitmore. That name. It was on the investor list. Federal Advisory Board member. Public image. Clean energy advocate. Private interest. Land acquisition. What does Whitmore want? I asked. She swallowed. There's something buried near the ridge. Not just mining waste. My pulse slowed. Then what? She looked at me like she was deciding whether to cross a line she could never uncross. Then she said it. Records. The sheriff frowned. What kind of records? Old shipment logs, she whispered. From the 1940s. The room went completely still. Shipment of what? I asked quietly. Her eyes met mine. Materials that were never supposed to be stored there. My mind raced. Mine in the 1920s. Logs in the 1940s. Covered by resort in 2026. Layer over layer. Buried truth. And my cabin. Sitting right on top of it. You weren't just restoring a house, Karen said softly. You bought a secret. Outside. I heard sudden noise, raised voices, footsteps running. The sheriff's radio crackled urgently. Multiple black SUVs approaching the station. No plates. Karen's face went white. He found out I talked, she whispered. The sheriff reached for his radio. Lock it down, he ordered. Through the hallway window, I saw them. Dark vehicles pulling in fast. Doors opening, men stepping out. Not county, not local, professional, and this time, they weren't pretending to be cops. The first SUV stopped sideways across the station entrance, blocking it. Doors opened in perfect timing. 4 men stepped out. Dark jackets, no badges, no hesitation. The sheriff muttered, "This just became federal-level stupid." Karen started shaking. "That's Whitmore's private security." I turned to her. "You're sure?" "I've seen them at fundraisers," she whispered. "They don't work for the county." Outside, one of the men walked straight toward the front doors like he owned the building. The sheriff grabbed his radio. "All units, defensive positions. No one fires unless necessary." I stepped closer to the hallway window. Calm, slow breath. Because panic makes mistakes. And whoever sent those men expected fear. The front door opened. They didn't break it. They walked in, bold. Like they believed they had authority. The lead man spoke first. "We're here to collect private property related to an ongoing federal matter." The sheriff crossed his arms. "You have a warrant?" The man smiled slightly. "We have clearance." "That's not a warrant," the sheriff replied. Tension filled the lobby. Deputies stood firm. The man's eyes scanned the room, then landed on me. "There he is." Karen gasped softly. I stepped forward. "You must be Whitmore's cleanup crew," I said evenly. He tilted his head. "You've inserted yourself into a matter far beyond your understanding." "I bought land," I replied. "Legally." "You interfered with a strategic development." "I restored a cabin." His smile faded. "You uncovered documents that are not yours to possess." "They were buried on my property," I said. "That makes them very much mine." The sheriff stepped between us slightly. "Without a warrant, you're not taking anything." The man's jaw tightened. "Sheriff, you don't want to stand in the way of federal interests." The sheriff didn't blink. "Then send real federal agents." Silence. One of the SUV's engines outside stayed running. "Ready." Karen suddenly stood up from the bench behind us. "It's about the shipment logs," she blurted. All eyes turned to her. The lead man's expression changed instantly. Cold. "You should be careful what you repeat," he said to her. Her voice shook but didn't break. "They were storing something in that mine. Something from the war." The sheriff looked at me. "War. 1940s. Shipment logs. Hazardous materials," I asked. The man ignored me. Instead, he stepped closer. "You are in possession of documents classified under historical federal seal." I raised an eyebrow. "Then why were they buried in a wooden box under a tree?" He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. If they were truly classified, they wouldn't have been left in the dirt for 80 years. The sheriff said calmly, "Unless you can present a signed warrant, you need to leave." For a moment, I thought it might turn violent. The men were trained. I could see it in how they shifted weight, how their eyes tracked movement. But then something unexpected happened. Another set of sirens. Louder, closer. State troopers. 3 cruisers pulled into the lot behind the SUVs. The lead man's jaw tightened. The sheriff hadn't called them. I hadn't either. Which meant someone else had. A state captain stepped out. Older. Sharp eyes. He walked straight toward the lobby doors. "I got a call from the governor's office," he said calmly. "There's concern about unauthorized federal interference." The lead man stiffened. "This doesn't concern the state." The captain smiled slightly. "Everything inside my borders concerns the state." The tension flipped. The private security team wasn't expecting backup against them. The captain turned to the sheriff. "What's going on?" The sheriff nodded toward me. "Local landowner uncovered historical documents tied to a development project. These gentlemen arrived without warrants." The captain looked at the lead man. "Do you have one?" Silence. That was answer enough. The captain stepped closer. "Then you're trespassing in a law enforcement facility." For the first time, I saw uncertainty in the lead man's eyes. He stepped back. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "It never is," I replied. They left, SUVs reversing smoothly, engines fading into the distance. But the message was clear. This had moved beyond a local land fight. Inside the station, the captain turned to me. "You must be Carter." I nodded. You just stepped on something very old and very protected. I didn't mean to, I said honestly. That's usually how these things happen, he replied. Karen looked drained. What exactly was stored in that mine? I asked. The captain hesitated, then spoke carefully. During World War II, several temporary storage sites were used for experimental materials. Not all were properly documented. Experimental, I asked. Early radioactive components, prototype shielding materials, some unstable. The word radioactive hung in the air. My cabin, my land, my son. Was it cleaned? I asked slowly. Officially, yes. And unofficially? He didn't answer. Which was answer enough. Karen whispered. My husband knew. Yes, the captain said. The resort wasn't just about money. It was about sealing access and controlling future testing. Testing on contaminated land, covered by luxury cabins. Families renting vacation homes, on top of unstable waste. My stomach turned. They were going to build over it, I said quietly. The captain nodded. And your historic landmark filing just blocked the fast-track permit. That's why they panicked. That's why the fire. That's why the SUVs. Because one quiet widower buying a broken cabin had just disrupted a decades-old cover-up. The sheriff looked at me. We need to secure that box. It's already logged as evidence, I said. Good, the captain replied. Because once this hits public channels, it won't stay contained. Karen suddenly looked up. They'll try to discredit you, she said to me. Already try, I replied. No, she shook her head. I mean professionally, financially, personally. I held her gaze. I don't scare easy. She gave a small, sad smile. That's what scares them. Hours later, I finally stepped outside the station. The air felt heavier, like the mountain itself was holding breath. My phone buzzed again. This time not an unknown number. A news alert. Historic land dispute linked to state development investigation. It had leaked. Fast. I hadn't spoken to media. The sheriff hadn't either. Which meant someone inside the system wanted some light on this. Good. Because darkness was their weapon. I drove back toward the cabin site. The fire damage looked worse in daylight. Half the porch gone. Roof charred. But the main structure stood. Strong. Stubborn. Like it refused to fall. Eli ran toward me from the patrol truck parked nearby. Dad, they said bad guys tried to take the house. I knelt down. They try, I said softly, but they failed. He looked at the burned sign in the dirt. I picked it up gently. The words future home were half blackened, but still readable. Eli looked up at me. Are we leaving? I shook my head. No. He nodded firmly. Good. Because I already told my friend this place is ours. I smiled slightly. Property rights, freedom. Standing your ground without losing your mind. This wasn't just about me anymore. Workers from the fire department inspected the structure. One of them approached. Foundation solid, he said. It'll take work. But it's salvageable. Salvageable. So was the truth. The sheriff walked up beside me. Whitmore's office just issued a statement, he said. And he claims no knowledge of any environmental cover-up. Says this is political sabotage. I exhaled slowly. Of course he does. But here's the twist, the sheriff added. There's more. He nodded. Federal inspectors are on their way. Not his people. Independent review. I looked at the ridge in the distance. Sunlight hitting the trees. Beautiful, peaceful, hiding decades of secrets beneath. If they find contamination, I said, this becomes national. The sheriff looked at me carefully. You didn't plan any of this, did you? I shook my head. I just wanted to fix a cabin. He chuckled softly. Sometimes the smallest decision shakes the biggest walls. Karen was released later that evening under supervision. She asked to speak to me before leaving. We stood near the edge of the property. Smoke smell still faint in the air. I believed him, she said quietly. I know, I replied. I thought I was protecting my son. You were being used. She nodded slowly. My husband won't forgive this. I looked at her steadily. He doesn't have that luxury anymore. She hesitated, then said something unexpected. If you rebuild, I'll testify. I studied her face. No arrogance now, just resolve. Why? I asked. She looked toward the ridge. Because if they built the resort, my son would have been playing on poisoned ground. Silence settled between us. Then she walked away. Days passed. Investigators arrived. Soil testing began. News crews circled. Whitmore went quiet. Too quiet. Then came the report. Partial contamination confirmed. Old storage barrels discovered deeper in the ridge. Corroded. Unstable. And then the final twist. The shipment logs didn't just show materials, they showed signatures. Authorization from officials who were still alive, including Whitmore's mentor. This wasn't just land fraud, it was a generational cover-up. And my cabin. Officially protected. Restoration funds approved. Environmental cleanup ordered at federal expense. Whitmore announced retirement for health reasons. Karen filed for separation. Her husband faced federal charges. And me. I stood on my land, hammer in hand. Rebuilding the porch. Eli handed me nails. The oak tree still stood tall behind us. I looked at the ridge one last time. They tried to bury the truth, I said quietly. Eli looked up. But you dug it up. I smiled. No. I corrected him. We did. And as the sun set behind the mountains, one thing became clear. They thought I was just restoring a 150-year-old cabin. They didn't realize I was restoring something else too. Accountability. And nobody gets to tell a man he can't stand on his own land. Not a fake HOA. Not a corrupt developer. Not even a federal name. Because sometimes the quiet guy with a hammer is the last person you should try to push. The inspectors didn't leave after the first report. They dug deeper. Literally, heavy equipment rolled up the ridge 3 days later. Yellow machines cutting through brush that hadn't been touched in decades. State officials sealed off a perimeter. News drones hovered above like metal birds. And then they found it. Not just a few corroded barrels. An entire underground concrete chamber, hidden beneath collapsed mining tunnels. The captain called me himself. You need to see this. I stood at the edge of the excavation zone. Helmet on. Boots sinking into loose soil. One of the engineers lifted a rusted metal panel. Under it, rows of sealed containers. Military markings barely visible under dirt and time. Stamped 1944. My stomach turned. This wasn't temporary storage, I said quietly. No. The captain replied. This was permanent dumping. Karen's husband must have known part of it, but not all, because this was bigger than profit. This was decades of silence. A federal investigator approached us. You're Carter, yes. He studied me carefully. You understand that your land is now part of an environmental hazard zone. I nodded slowly. So what does that mean? It means we may need temporary access to your property during containment. I looked at the cabin, half-rebuilt porch. Fresh beams. Eli's new sign hanging proudly. This stays mine, I said firmly. The investigator nodded. Ownership doesn't change. Good, because that mattered. 2 nights later, the story exploded nationally. News anchors talking about forgotten war waste. Political commentators arguing about oversight and corruption. Whitmore officially resigned. But something felt off. Too clean, too quick. Then the sheriff called again. They moved Karen's husband. Moved? I asked. Transferred to federal holding before formal charges. That didn't sit right. Why rush it? I asked. Exactly. I drove to the station. The captain was already there. They're trying to contain testimony, he said bluntly. Meaning? I asked. If he talks publicly, names get dragged out. And they don't want that. The captain nodded. Karen showed up an hour later. No makeup. No blazer. Just quiet anger. They told me I can't contact him, she said. Federal restriction. The sheriff replied. She looked at me. He's scared. He should be. I said evenly. No. She shook her head. Scared for himself. And for us. I crossed my arms. What aren't you saying? She hesitated, then spoke low. There were investors from overseas, private buyers. If this contamination story spreads fully, contracts collapse. That's already happening, I said. Not the big ones, she whispered. The captain looked up sharply. What big ones? She swallowed. There's a second phase. The room went quiet again. Of course there was. What phase? I asked. They weren't just building a resort, she said. They were planning a research facility. The word landed heavy. Research? The sheriff asked. Yes. For what? She shook her head. He never told me exactly. Just said the land was strategically quiet. Away from attention. My pulse slowed. Quiet mountain land. Contaminated soil. Historic cover-up. They weren't sealing the past, I said slowly. They were preparing the future. The captain's face hardened. If that's true, this isn't just corruption. It's ongoing. I finished. That night, Patrols doubled around the ridge, but just after midnight, my security cameras picked up movement near the oak tree again. Different vehicles, is time. No headlights, 3 figures moving carefully. I didn't wait. I called the sheriff and drove out there myself. When I arrived, the deputies were already surrounding the area. One of the figures bolted toward the trees. He didn't get far. They tackled him near the old bar. When they pulled his hood off, my breath caught. Not Karen's husband. Not private security. Whitmore himself, out here, in the dirt, trying to access something personally. The sheriff stared at him. You really thought this was a good idea? Whitmore didn't answer. He just looked at me, calm, too calm. You don't understand what you've interrupted, he said quietly. Then explain it, I replied. He smiled faintly. That chamber isn't the only one. Silence. There are others, he continued. Across the ridge, across the state. This one was simply the most stable. For what? I demanded. For long-term storage of radioactive waste. The captain asked. Whitmore's eyes shifted. Of materials that shouldn't exist publicly. My blood ran cold. You mean weapons research? I said. He didn't deny it. The sheriff tightened his grip on Whitmore's arm. You're confessing to illegal dumping? Whitmore laughed softly. No. I'm confessing to protecting national security. There's nothing secure about poisoning land. I shot back. He looked at me carefully. You were supposed to walk away from that cabin. I don't scare easy, I reply. Yes, he nodded slowly. That's the problem. Deputies cuffed him. As they led him toward the patrol car, he turned one last time. You think you won? He said calmly. You just made yourself visible. The word stuck. Visible. The next morning, federal oversight teams arrived in full force. Not Whitmore's allies. Independent investigators. The governor publicly demanded transparency. Suddenly, everyone wanted distance from the project. Investors pulled funding. Bank accounts froze. But the threats didn't stop. Anonymous emails, private numbers calling and hanging up. A black sedan parked down the road for hours one afternoon. Pressure. Subtle. Constant. Eli noticed. Dad, are bad guys still mad? I knelt beside him. Some people don't like when secrets come out, I said gently. Are we safe? I held his shoulders. Yes, and I meant it. Because this time, the entire country was watching. Sunlight is powerful. Weeks passed. The contamination cleanup officially began. Hazard teams in full suits moved barrels out carefully. Reporters interviewed me daily. They kept asking why I didn't just sell and leave. My answer stayed simple. I didn't fight for this country to be told I can't stand on my own land. That line spread fast. People understood it. Veterans wrote letters. Neighbors brought food. Volunteers helped rebuild the porch. The cabin slowly came back to life. One evening, as I hammered in the final railing post, the sheriff walked up. They're indicting Whitmore, he said. On what charges? Environmental crimes, fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and the others. Rolling in. I exhaled slowly. And Karen's husband. Talking. Fully cooperating. That surprised me. He's trading information, the sheriff explained. Trying to reduce time. And Karen? She filed official testimony this morning. I looked at the cabin. Smoke scars still visible on the wood. But stronger now. Repaired. Funny, I said quietly. She started this by screaming that it was her son's inheritance. The sheriff nodded. And now her son inherits a lesson instead. We stood in silence for a moment. The mountain air felt lighter, cleaner. Eli ran out onto the new porch. Dad, it's finished. I stepped up beside him. The boards creaked softly, solid. I looked across the ridge. Excavation lights still glowing in the distance. Cleanup ongoing. Truth exposed. They tried fake authority. They tried fear. They tried fire. They even tried federal muscle. But they forgot something simple. This was never just land. It was history. And history doesn't stay buried forever. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Eli leaned against me. Are we really staying forever? I smiled slightly. Yeah. I said, this is home. And this time. No one argued. Winter came early that year. Snow covered the ridge where the excavation lights once burned through the night. The heavy machines were gone now. The barrels were removed. The chamber sealed properly this time. Under full public record. Not silence. The mountain looked peaceful again, but it wasn't hiding anything anymore. The indictments became trials. Whitmore's name filled headlines for months. Emails surfaced, signed approvals, budget transfers disguised as infrastructure upgrades. The investigation widened beyond our county. Other sites were found in neighboring states. It wasn't just one secret. It was a network. Karen testified, calm, direct. She didn't protect her husband in court. She didn't protect herself either. She told the truth about the fake HOA threats, the stage violations, the pressure tactics. Her husband took a plea deal. Prison time, heavy fines, permanent ban from development projects. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he glanced at me once. "You weren't supposed to stay," he muttered. I didn't answer, because that was the whole point. I stayed. Spring followed winter. The cabin stood stronger than before. Fresh pine beams, new roof, windows that caught morning sunlight perfectly. We kept the burn marks on one section of the porch railing, on purpose. A reminder. The historic landmark plaque arrived in April, small bronze sign near the front steps. Established 1876, protected site, simple, permanent. The state funded a proper environmental restoration around the ridge. Clean soil replaced the contaminated patches. Monitoring stations were installed quietly. Transparent this time. Reporters eventually stopped calling. The news cycle moved on. But something had shifted in town. People talked more openly now. About land rights. About questioning authority. About not assuming someone loud automatically has power. One afternoon, Karen came by. No red blazer. Just jeans and a tired but steady expression. She stood at the edge of the property, not stepping past the line. "I wanted to say something," she said. I walked down from the porch. "You don't have to," I replied. "I do." She looked at the oak tree. "For years I believed we were owed something, that the world had taken from us. I never asked for proof. I just followed anger. I stayed quiet. My son asked me last week why I was fighting so hard for land we never lived on," she continued. I didn't have an answer. Silence stretched between us. "I'm sorry," she said finally. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. "I accept that," I said. She nodded once, then turned to leave. Halfway down the path she stopped. "You rebuilt it better," she added softly. I looked at the cabin behind me. "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes fire shows you what needs strengthening." She gave a small, sad smile, and walked away for the last time. Summer arrived bright and warm. Eli planted a small garden near the porch. Tomatoes, corn, sunflowers. He said the house deserved color. We found old photographs from the original owner tucked inside one of the restored walls during construction. A family standing proudly on the same porch over 100 years ago. I framed one and hung it inside. History doesn't belong to one name. It belongs to those who protect it. One evening, the sheriff came by off duty. No uniform, just a friend. We sat on the porch watching the sunset stretch over the mountains. "Quiet now," he said. "Feels strange," I admitted. "You ever regret digging under that tree?" I thought about it. The threats, the fire, the SUVs, the courtrooms. Then I looked at Eli chasing fireflies in the yard. "No," I said firmly. The sheriff nodded. "You did more than save a cabin." I didn't respond right away. Because I didn't buy the land to become a headline. I bought it because something broken needed care. Turns out it wasn't just wood and nails. It was truth. It was accountability. It was a reminder that power only works when people back down. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who refuses. Later that night, Eli sat beside me on the porch steps. "Dad, were you scared when they tried to take the house?" I smiled slightly. "Of course." He looked surprised. "You didn't look scared." "That's because being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," I said. "It means you don't let fear decide." He thought about that for a moment, then nodded like he understood something important. The wind moved gently through the trees. The oak stood tall behind us. Unmoved, unburned, unburied. I looked out over the land one last time. 5 acres. A 150-year-old cabin. A story that was supposed to stay hidden forever. They tried fake authority. They tried shame. They tried law. They tried fire. They even tried power from the top. But in the end, the truth didn't need to shout. It just needed someone willing to stand still long enough to uncover it. I wrapped an arm around Eli's shoulders. "This," I said quietly, looking at the cabin glowing under porch light, "is what owning your land really means. Not control. Not ego, not power over others. It means responsibility. It means protection. It means standing your ground without losing who you are. The mountains didn't answer. They didn't need to, because for the first time since I signed those papers, everything was finally still, and no one ever told us to leave again.